Hey everyone, and welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Derek Bittner, and I'm joined today by Ash Paulson and special guest Sabi and Duck to discuss the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate blog theory that's recently been making the rounds. So, let's get started. Alright, I'm gonna be completely honest, this one kind of snuck up on me, and I'm not fully caught up on it. I know a little bit about it, but I'm actually going to pass this over to Ash because you've actually been doing a fair amount of research into this supposed blog theory, actually working with Andre on something of your own, and then it turns out, well, Sabi and Duck actually have their own theories as well. So Ash, why don't we give a broad introduction to this to start us off?
Right, so I had been doing my own independent research into the rate of character overviews that were happening on the Smash Brothers blog, and by character overview I mean like when you get an overview of a character like Peach, which everyone knows is in the game. It's nothing new, not surprising, but they'll do those character overview posts where they'll post the character trailer and just do like a little sentence about that character. And so I've been kind of just tracking the rate of those character updates in kind of a half-hearted effort to see if I could maybe come up with maybe a guess at maybe the final roster count doing this, just kind of as a fun side project. And then I come to find out that there are people who are doing way more detailed research and tracking than I am, such as Sabi and Duck here, who are just really going all in on this angle. And so we wanted to do a video about this so-called blog theory that's been making the rounds. However, after looking at all the math that they've been doing and all the different, the data and everything, we just figured there's so much that we could possibly get wrong with us trying to interpret this, so why don't we go straight to the source and ask Sabi and Duck themselves to explain the blog theory and kind of what it's all about and why it may point to a potential guess at the final roster number of characters in the roster. So with that said, Sabi and Duck, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and take it away for now and kind of explain the blog theory for our listeners in an overall sense, if you could.
Okay, so if I had to summarize blog theory in any way, I'd probably say that I feel like compared to the Smash 4 Miiverse posts or even Smash Dojo, that the Smash Ultimate blog is, after a while, because I only got into it actually after the K. Rool trailer and the August 8th Direct, but when you look through it, you can sort of see there is like sort of an underlying structure. It probably took me way too long to figure that out. But it came to a point where if you look at it from a bunch of different angles, week-by-week basis, day-by-day basis, if you manage to collect all the data together, if you look at the JSON numbers on the website, how those line up, if you can look at the actual statistics, Ash, like you were researching, you can look at like the average, the percent that a character will be featured in the blog post, something along those lines. You can effectively bring it down to a couple of different methods, and a lot of them sort of lead to the same thing, which is what me and Sabi found out, because Sabi did a few calculations. He got some really, really nice numbers, and then I did some more, and we eventually came to almost a singularity. That's at least how we've been referring it to. But it originally started as a bunch of little pieces, but then it started coming together and started becoming something bigger than itself.
So what's the overall thing that you've come to a conclusion with this theory? What have you basically discovered about the number of characters they've revealed and maybe what it spells for the complete version or the full version of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate?
Duckmeat did a lot of math on what we can expect, but there's a lot more than just what we can expect, because we also went into what's in the site, the code dumps or the JSON of the website. We actually have quite a few people helping us with this. I discovered from somebody else that there was an easy way to look at the details of a post on the blog site. There's numbers for how they're scheduled, and there's also a category that describes the order they were created in. We can't really predict anything with that, but it was important to helping us realize why our theory is stable to begin with. Because while we did calculations before, people would bring up points it could slow down, but we had to kind of bring up counterpoints to that. The general consensus right now, before going into that, is that there are 6 to 8.
When you say 6 to 8, you mean 6 to 8 more characters to be revealed, correct?
Yeah, not
okay.
echoes or it could be anything.
Yeah, it could be any combination. It could be 8 uniques, no echoes. It's probably not going to be that, but it's basically like a rough count for uniques and echoes combined.
Gotcha, okay.
But JSON and stuff basically told us that the blog is methodical to begin with, which kind of strengthened the whole theory and why we really went into it after a little while. Duckmeat was cataloging the dates of the posts, but the JSON of a website includes the order they were created in and the order they're scheduled, because they actually have different values. Everything was chronological up until that direct got delayed in the beginning of September, but the posts after that weren't chronological. Like, there was the Executor post the day before the direct, and then they didn't have a blog post the day after, the day on the direct. And then the following Monday, the post number for that day's post was completely off. It went from 133 to 144. So we kind of wondered why it became so random. Why didn't we just skip Isabel? Which is where we started realizing there's a really specific pattern. Most people realized music was on Wednesday, but we also realized most weeks had 3 fighters. A few weeks in July had 4 fighters, and a few weeks had 2 fighters, but they balanced out. They were even. So we noticed that, and the JSON was also important because we noticed that while the posts were randomized after that, supposedly, we realized that they planned it out even methodically after the delay, because 142 was the day after the delay, but they did that so they could have 3 fighters that week. If they just skipped Isabel, it wouldn't have been 3 fighters. So it kind of shows that the posts are trying to follow some kind of pattern or some kind of merit.
Yeah, I agreed with Sabby that there is a rough structure to it, that there's 3 fighters a week, music on Wednesdays. There's a lot of that, but then Sabby went and pulled some numbers, and these numbers, if I recall the exact calculation, I think you actually put it on your doc, but basically what he did was he took the total number of fighters that were revealed at the time, you divided by the amount of weeks that had elapsed, which I think at the time was 15 or so, and the number that he got was eerily similar to around 3, which there's your 3 fighters on average, but then you multiply that by the remaining weeks you have after that, which I think is 11. If you're counting a week as basically a long string of days where you're having continuous posts every 24 hours. So stuff like, the 4-day week, that counts as a week, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
You sum that up, you get 33. And then what you have is, at the moment, right now, it's going to change later because it's probably going to come out after. We're probably going to get a few character drops after this releases, but right now it's 26. You subtract that 26 from that 33, and you get nothing other than 7. And what I did was, as Sabby talked about earlier, I was documenting a lot of these posts in terms of how many things did they introduce? I documented something that says if it includes a character or if it includes an assist, I put in 1s and 0s, and I would average those 1s and 0s to effectively get probabilities that a character or an assist or a Pokeball Pokemon would get featured in a specific blog post. And what I ended up getting is I used a similar method to what Sabby did, but on a day-by-day basis instead of a weekly basis. And I did get something very similar. I got something around 33. I think I got something around 33, 34, 35. It's a little bit off, but still very, very similar to what Sabby had gotten. And I thought of some other ways of doing it as well, such as I talked about earlier how I was averaging, how many posts are averaged a day. I was getting 1.3. And when I multiplied that by the days we had left at the time, you get projected future posts, how many posts you can expect until release. And you subtract all of your expected values that for each post type, music, items, stages, whatever, and you also get a number around 6, 7, 8. So you can sort of see where this is going. We're converging to a point where we're doing lots of math, and all the math is pointing to a range of like 6 to 8.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's actually, so it's rather fascinating that, like, we still have those 11 weeks left, and according to all this math that you guys have been doing, which is frankly impressive, it looks like we're going to get maybe between 6 to 8 characters, which actually I believe falls in line with that Smash Ultimate Special Edition box where they had the characters lined up, and I believe there was like they were lined up in groups of 8 on that box. So It made me wonder why they had it lined up like that, and this theory sort of falls in line with that idea and that sort of question that I had, that holy crap, maybe we do have 8 more characters, which seems insane, especially when Sakurai said, I don't expect that many new characters. Apparently not. Hard to say.
I don't know. The way I thought about that was I was thinking that more in terms of uniques, because if I recall, there were a few interviews where Sakurai was talking about how, like, stuff like Lucina, Dark Pit, excuse my language here, but he doesn't count them as like, they're not like priority characters. They're more like the dessert on top. Like, if you have extra development time, sure, throw in Lucina. Throw in Dark Pit. People will like them.
Yeah, that's kind of how I seen it too. I seen people discussing how when he said not to expect many, he could be talking about like unique fighters, and the echoes are to like make up for less uniques.
That would make a lot of sense.
Well, I have to say, I'm super impressed by all the math you guys have been doing, because my method was a lot simpler. I didn't look into any of the JSONs or anything like that. Basically, what I did was I took the first update, which was Tuesday, June 12th, and I took the end of week 1, which was Friday, June 15th, and I established a total duration of 26 weeks leading up to the release on Friday, December 7th. And literally all I did was I was tracking the character overviews each week, and like you guys, I got the same formula of generally an average of 3 character overviews per week, with some weeks in there having 4, a couple in there having 2. But basically, the latest, I determined the latest character to get an overview by the halfway point, who was King DDD, which was on Monday, September 3rd, and he was the 38th character to get an overview. So all I did was I doubled that, because that was the halfway point. So I just said 38 times 2, 76, and there was my number that I came up with. And I was originally going to make a video talking about that, but then I realized all the research you guys had done and how you came up with your numbers using way more data than I did. So this is basically why we came to you guys to get it straight from the source. But did you ever consider using, a method similar to what I did? Obviously, it's way more simplistic, but had you ever considered that method?
It's kind of similar to mine, because I just calculated the average per week and then just multiplied it by the number of remaining weeks. It's really simple. It's really similar to that. It's pretty simple. Nothing compared to Duckmeat's math. Yeah.
Well, Duckmeat, I like your math more because you come up with 80. I come up with 76. So I much prefer your math if you're right, because that's 4 more characters than I would have ended up with.
I actually started from a very similar place, because like when you see like the chart I have now, believe me when I say it did not start this pretty. Sabby pretty much anyone in the server can vouch for the fact that this was like a literal mess to sort through. But yeah, it eventually started, what it started as was effectively, I'm gonna list all the blog updates in like a specific way, so that like the ones and zeros, or so that I could do percentages, number of things introduced, or so that I could record like, how many blogs are there per day. Those were like sort of targets I wanted to do. But then it just sort of started growing, and I had eventually come to a point where I got the basic structure where it's like, total characters, percent, projected, and then predictions. And with the prediction, and I think the biggest thing I'd probably have to say about blog theory is that it's very, very liquid, I feel, because the blog changes daily, so you have a data set that effectively changes every 24 hours for the better or for the worse. Like, I talked about this in the Discord, that sometimes the data will sometimes skew a little bit depending on what's added. Like, for example, if we get say hypothetically 3 assist featurettes in a row, how will that affect the data? Well, it'll skew up assists, it'll skew down everything else. it's fun because you sort of have to know when, like, oh, when do you have to talk about, like, oh, it's a little bit biased because it's doing this many things in a row, or you have to basically know where to draw the line and realize that, like, oh, there's some assumptions that could be introducing some bias.
You're getting some math. It's very fluid. It changes daily. And I believe there's some people, like you mentioned how people were sort of, well, saying, what about this? Does this change up? And this may not actually be the case. And it might actually be wrong because of the math and just sort of random. What are some of the popular, more, I guess, prominent ideas being floated around that sort of, not discredit, but sort of like challenge the theory a bit? And how do you accommodate those, I guess?
Oh, right. I cover that the most because I think this is really solid, because I've seen like 5 arguments against it. All of them are kind of weak. The first one is that it's too fluid, which isn't the case. As I mentioned with a JSON, the posts, even after the delay, they were rescheduled in a very meticulous way. Post number 150, which was Pikachu, which was last Friday, would have originally been last Friday. They rescheduled it so it would be completely back in order after like 2 weeks. The order of the posts were rescheduled after the delay, but they were done in such a way that they could have 3 fighters a week, have music on Wednesday, and also get back on schedule, which it is now. That's one of the points. It's just too meticulous to not really mean anything. It wouldn't make sense for Sakurai to plan out the blog this much and have to reschedule it so much after the delay if it was just not important. And there'd be no reason to really slow it down towards the end if the pace has been so consistent so far. If you planned it out that much and you spread it out perfectly, why would you need to stop at the end? It would have been more convenient to just pace it out in a way that it would spread out completely. It's a possibility, but it's not as likely. Another point is that, man, I can't think of strong arguments.
I mean, that's a good sign, honestly.
Well, I mean, that's already a good start. I mean, that's, the fact that it's, you have data that shows that, Sakurai planned out these blog posts so meticulously, I think, is its own good argument in favor of the blog theory, even without getting into other arguments against. However, if you have any others, I'm certainly would love to hear them.
Right. I just remembered. I put it on my document. I pointed out a few counterpoints in my document. Another one was that the blog might not finish on release date and might finish like a week early, and so we'll have less fighters. I also don't feel like that's very strong, because again, it's scheduled out and it had to fix itself in such a way after the delay that it seems like it's running on a very specific schedule. And I don't see why they'd schedule it out so much. It would end earlier. And I could see it going beyond release date, but stuff after release date most likely wouldn't be like the major content, like fighter posts, because again, they're trying to plan it out in a specific way for now. It seems like the delay caused a big issue. Like I said, they rescheduled everything around. Like one day you'd have post number 142, then you'd have 138. It seems way too hectic when the delay happened, and everything's been chronological so far, and it just seems way too meticulous to end early. I would imagine if a blog continued after release, it would just be more like DLC posts, sales figures, amiibo, stuff like that. Another argument I've seen is that like if we do have that many more characters, it'd be all revealed at once, and then the blog would be jam-packed, so that wouldn't really be 3 fighters a week. But again, the August Direct happened, that had 5 characters, and they were spread out between 2 weeks to still have 3 fighters a week.
Right.
There's one other argument that gets brought up a lot, which is spirit mode posts. People say when that gets revealed, there won't be like less fighter posts, or that'll make up for no more fighters. The biggest argument against that, and one that Duckmeat also reasoned against, was that fighter posts and item posts haven't like affected each other's rate at all. When there's like 2 items a week, there's still 3 fighters a week. There's no correlation between their numbers, and if there were spirit mode posts, they would likely not affect fighter posts either. Even in the JSON of a blog, the posts are categorized like fighter posts, item posts have their own category, so yeah.
There does seem to be a bit more of a push towards the characters rather than anything else. Like, we've gotten assist trophies, Pokemon, and whatnot, but we have so many stages returning, and they don't really focus on those a lot in the blog. Like, we'll get a few here and there, so I can see what you mean. They could just easily pop out the stages at that point and use Spirit Mode instead.
Yeah, and even then, Duckmeat compiled this better than I did, but he, like, counted how many new items and new Pokeballs haven't been covered, and there's only, like, 8 or 9 Pokeballs that haven't been covered that are, like, added into Ultimate, so they're also, like, spacing out items a bit, and since there's less, they'll, like, post them less. It seems like they're spacing it all out for it to be finished around release.
Almost all of the worthwhile counterarguments that I've seen against blog theory are almost always rooted in the assumptions they're made, in calculations, in the ideas that we're taught, and the ideas that are discussed about it. But it's usually linked from like some sort of, because when you have to make an analysis like this, you sort of have to, you can't really like make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. You have to say some things. You have to say something like, oh, we've been getting like one character a day, and there was the one time where the Castlevania music sort of threw everything off course. But if you look at the Japanese blog, it basically stays on course. So an assumption that you can make from characters are consistently once per day, that you're not going to get like, say, 2 characters per day or 3 characters per day. You have to start with like really basic stuff and then build on that to stuff like the item assumption that Sabi started talking about, which was sort of coincidental because I was just looking through the items Pokemon assists and I realized, because like on the website they have some of them featured, like they have Gray Fox, Sukapon, they have Mimikyu, and the 2 Vulpixes. They have those specifically featured, and they sometimes have like, oh, there's also going to be Waluigi, Ashley. Those are going to be off to the side. But there were certain ones that already had images, which is important because you can directly pull those assets for blog posts. It just sort of clicked in a way where it was just like, oh, these are essentially like the missing link almost. And then all I had left was stages, and stages, I'll admit, I fully subscribe to the Kurokoro 108 stages theory. And if you look into the chart, you see I have 5 new stages as what I think will be featured. I mean, they're definitely going to feature a few older stages, but I think 5 is like the bare minimum.
Speaking of Pokemon and assist trophies, I have a question for you, and that is, I'm guessing that you two were not thrown off the way I was by this week's first update, because usually Sunday updates I've found are usually character overviews. However, this week the Sunday update was Moon assist trophy.
Oh, this is important.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad I asked that.
Is actually a reason.
Okay, cool.
There's an image somebody made. I think I sent to Ash on Twitter. It was a calendar of all the posts every week. The past 15 weeks have had a fighter every Monday, except for like the Monday of a reveal, because it wasn't revealed until Tuesday, and then the week after there was no Monday post. But every other week it's been a fighter on Monday. So we were really thrown off because last Friday, as I said, was post number 150, which was back on track. Even, like, after the delay, all of the numbers that were missing before and skipped were all covered now. So, we're back on track. There's only one, which is 133, which I figured would be an item. So when I seen that the moon was tweeted, it was, like, tweeted, like, 6-7 hours before it was even posted. I figured it'd be a second post. It'd be a fighter. I figured it would just be the first time a Monday would have 2 posts. But I woke up and it was just the moon, and it was actually post 152. So it was still on schedule. I guess 143 is probably scrapped. There are a few numbers that were scrapped before. I didn't know why it was just the moon. It didn't really throw a wrench in the theory, because we can still have 3 fighters this week, or even 2 will still keep the average at about 3. But there's actually a reason why Moon was posted on Monday that Duckmeat found. It was like a holiday in Japan, a moon viewing holiday.
Oh, okay.
Which actually explains why the post didn't even come onto the Japanese blog until like almost 10 p.m. their time, closer to midnight. So it made sense.
Yeah, it was sort of funny because it was just like, oh, why is it so late? It's just like, oh, it's the Moon Festival. When does the moon come out? At night. Doesn't that sort of click any gears together? But yeah, but I think that's a really interesting thing to bring up, because we'd have some people on the server try to predict like, oh, can we predict like, oh, when's Luigi or Gray Fox or Kawasaki? When is he gonna get featured? because a lot of these, not a lot of them, but a few of them are sometimes linked to important dates.
Exactly.
Not a lot, but I want to be very specific. It's not a lot of them. Like literally, like Moon and like 2 or 3 or 4 others out of 70. And some examples are like Wario was featured with a WarioWare Gold memory because he was featured on the day that the game released. And a similar thing happened with Samus, where Samus was released on the same date as, I think, the 32nd anniversary of the Metroid series. But it's not like an interesting tangent off of, like I said, because you have the blog theory and then you have like its sub-theories that branch off from it, and that was one of them. And I think me and Sabi both have our own subscriptions to like, we're thinking like, because they're so rare, there's like going to be 1 or 2 that we sort of subscribe to.
Well, is there anything else about this theory that you guys wanted to cover before we close this out?
If there's anything I will say right now is that as we're speaking right now, I've actually been making a brand new build of the blog theory that not only incorporates daily methods, but some of Sabi's weekly methods, because it just got to the point where I think, okay, these are really interesting. I feel like I want to see if I can put these into the sheet as well. So yeah, if anything, be prepared for a brand new build. I'm keeping the old build though, because I feel like the old build does have some merit to it, and I want to keep it. Sabi actually used some of your methods, and I basically like used some of your methods and extended upon them with like some of my own applications, and I did get more similar numbers. I got some weird ones, but it's still kicking. It's still kicking.
Excellent.
It just further showcasing that liquid nature you were talking about.
Yeah, that liquid nature, because like it's not just the blog theory changing, because sometimes I'll literally hear something, I'll be like, oh, that could be cool to throw in. I always love to hear like new ways to interpret the data. I love that, because that means there's more calculations, this is sort of like the same reason I only started like very late in, because you can't make something really, really nice like this out of like 3 blog posts or 3 sets of data, because when you have so much stuff stacked up, it eventually starts to peak into a singularity, which I think is really cool. This was honestly, it looks like a lot of work, but I had a lot of fun making this, because it sort of inspired me to think of like, oh, okay, I have all these numbers, how many ways can you skin a cat? This is the dilemma I'm sort of in.
Right.
Besides the things you've been doing, I feel like the server we've been mentioning a few times has been contributing a lot, and
oh yeah, totally.
They like branched off and made a lot of graphics about like, somebody even calculated different sizes that the select screen could use for character portraits, and remember how echoes and unique fighters are stacked, like they accounted for stacked and unstacked viewings of the select screens, and how like what ratio of uniques and echoes would work the best. I'm just kind of impressed. Just kind of want to give a shout out to other people who've been working on this too.
That's really awesome. Yeah, it's really cool when you can sort of come together and get these theories. Who knows if they're right or not, but hey, maybe it's fun to like think about the possibilities, and that itself is just a kind of a good time. But you can also get some really fun discoveries in the meantime. Yeah, it's especially fun when it's something as like, it's not just like, oh, something on V, where it's like, oh, the newcomers are Sora, Goku, and Squidward. It's not something like that. This is an actual thing with math and people trying to cut math in multiple different ways. And it's very fun because you have a lot of people with a lot of different ideas, and I don't know, I feel like there's something very fun about just taking all this data and actually working with it. Not just like, oh, shooting off like crackpot ideas, but it's actually like a project. Because I feel like, Sabi, at this point we're sort of challenging ourselves, like, ooh, how right are we when December 7th drops? Will we stand on top?
I would like to say that anybody can help contribute too. God, we have like 5 people helping us right now.
Oh, more than that. We got a bunch of people.
Yeah, true.
So basically you're saying anyone listening, if they have their own ideas or ways that they could contribute to the blog theory that's ongoing, especially because it's so liquid, that they should feel more than welcome to do so.
Yeah, I think I even gave you a link to a server that we use for like working on this that people could help with too.
Yeah, we'll be sure to put that in the description as well. So anybody who's
Thank you.
listening and interested in this, they can definitely jump in and hopefully help you guys out.
Yeah, that'd be
Cool.
great.
All right, well, I think that covers it for our Smash blog theory discussion, so thank you for watching, and if you like this video, be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain, and Sabi, where can we find you at?
I'll be making some more Reddit posts about this theory. I'll try to be a bit public about that, but I also have a Twitter. New Wabi Sabi is my Twitter handle.
Perfect. What about you, Duck?
I basically just work exclusively through sheets, and sometimes I retweet stuff on my Twitter at duckmeat13. Sometimes I upload like, hey, new build, come take a look. But yeah, I say this a lot of the time, but if you have good theories, if you have good ways, if you know how to skin this cat, send me messages. Send me messages. I don't care who you are. If you're good at math and you have an idea on how to look at this, I'm listening.
Awesome. And of course, be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more Orange Smash and other things gaming as well. Until next time, bye.